BravesToday.com. I'm Zach Blackerby. He's Lindsey Crosby. Alex Anthopoulos. He got winter meetings going Sunday night.
He did. First big deal of the winter meetings, the Atlanta Braves make a trade with the Seattle Mariners. They're bringing in 3 players, outfielder Jarred Kelenic, left-handed pitcher Marco Gonzales, and first baseman Evan White. The Atlanta Braves send out right-hand pitcher Jackson Kowar, who they got from the Royals just a few weeks ago for Kyle Wright, and prospect Cole Phillips. My first reactions, I was asleep. This trade happened late at night.
I had to wake you up. That's right.
You had to wake me up. I'm a morning person, so but first reactions, Atlanta has solidified every single position on the roster in a long-term contract. As far as every spot on the diamond has a guy who's locked up through at least 2027 or 2028.
Yeah, I mean, you get a potential starter at the end of that rotation with Gonzales. And I think the question about that left field is now kind of, okay, it seems like Atlanta's good to go there.
Yeah, and so Kelenic was a former top prospect of the Mariners. Really had his breakout in 23 after 2 abbreviated stints in the majors where he struggled in 21 and 22.
Yeah.
Not a completely finished product. Strikeout rates still run pretty high. He's mostly a fastball hitter, so he struggles with spin and off speed. So there's still some work to be done, some development to be done. But he's a guy that defensively can play all 3 outfield positions, so he gives you some depth, as well as somebody who we have seen WRC plus of over 100 at the major league level in 23 is able to produce. So you now have somebody there, obviously, who can play left field. You can platoon him with Vaughn Grissom if you need to. Very promising piece. Again, not a finished product. We're going to have more about him on BravesToday.com today. A piece, what are the Atlanta Braves getting in Jarred Kelenic? We'll dive into more of that in detail.
Sure. So the instant reaction on the baseball corner of the internet Sunday night was Atlanta ripped off Seattle.
Yeah, this was 100% a salary dump from the Mariners' perspective.
Sure.
Kelenic is he's still in a pre-arbitration contract, so he's going to get just under $1 million this year. He goes to arbitration for the first time in 25. But Gonzales and White combined in 2024 are owed $20 million. And so this was, in essence, Atlanta taking on $20 million in salary in 24 and another couple million in 25 for White to get 6 years of Jarred Kelenic. And it ultimately ends up being a good move. We didn't know what Atlanta was going to do to fill that left field vacancy. It turns out they're willing to take on some salary this year to get multiple years of control in the future.
Well, in fact, we heard from AA Sunday morning saying, hey, maybe Vaughn Grissom will play outfield. And that may still happen. There may be some sort of competition that forms there, but it's just kind of wild. He had to know that this was a possibility when he told everybody that.
Yeah, the reports are that this came together fully on Sunday. I'm sure they had preliminary conversations on it. And he did indicate last night, talking to the media, that Vaughn Grissom was still going to be in the mix. This could be a platoon in left field. Some of that's going to depend on how well Vaughn Grissom converts to the outfield.
Sure.
He's playing it in Puerto Rico for the first time this winter. He'll report in a couple days. And so some of it depends on that. Some of it depends on platoon stuff. Kelenic has different splits against righties versus lefties. One's a left-handed hitter, one's a right-handed hitter. So there's scenarios where you want to use one or the other. And it's going to be interesting to see how Atlanta configures that outfield going forward. But you have to think the guy that's played outfield his whole career versus the career infielder. Kelenic's going to be the starter on opening day, barring some sort of unforeseen acquisition, which Anthopoulos did say they do still have the money to make an impact addition if it's the right player at the right price. So they're not necessarily looking for an addition in left field going forward. He said they felt like they're pretty set there now, but you could always see a signing if a fantastic opportunity opened up at a great price.
So when I saw that quote, I assumed he was kind of hinting at pitching. Do you think there's a chance that could be left field too?
I think it probably is going to end up being pitching simply because now you have bodies. When you count Forrest Wall, you now have 5 outfielders on the roster. Theoretically, Marcell Ozuna could play outfield, but I don't want to count on that. But you do have 5 outfielders now on the roster for 3 spots. You have 2 guys in Forrest Wall and Kelenic that can cover center field if something were to happen to Michael Harris. We saw the back issue last year with him. And so it feels like, again, unless it's just an absolute steal of a contract you can get, you're probably done in left field. But pitching really does feel like that is the more impact position because Marco Gonzales gives you another option at the position. We know that AA mentioned he wanted to have 10 or 11 potential starting options, but he is a back of the rotation guy. He's not a guy who's going to be able to start a playoff game for you.
Right. So as far as what Atlanta gave up, we've talked time and time again, like the farm system for the Braves isn't elite, and you give up some pieces. What are your thoughts on that as far as like the potential future here?
So the big piece to me here is Cole Phillips, 2022 second rounder, and I think it's going to end up being fine that Atlanta dealt him. So was in April of his draft year, hit 99 or 100 in his showcase performances and things like that, but soon after had Tommy John surgery and has not pitched officially in Atlanta since being drafted. It's about 20 months out from surgery, and he hasn't pitched yet. And the last time we saw him pitch, again, as a prepster, he was spinning a pretty wicked slider. He was hitting 100 miles an hour on his fastball, but then he had Tommy John surgery. So we don't really know what Cole Phillips is. And even if he were to get full seasons of work in the minors starting in 2024, you were probably looking at 3 to 4 years before you potentially could have had him in the bigs. This is essentially the highest risk of any prospect category, a right-handed prep pitcher who was injured in high school. And so it feels like the Braves trade these kind of prospects all the time, and they come to regret it maybe once a decade. I'm really not concerned. If there was a prospect pitcher to trade, I feel like this was the best one, simply because he was the farthest away from the bigs, was the highest risk, and the most unknown out of any of your top 10 prospects in the system.
So the player involved in this trade that we've seen the least chatter about, and we've mentioned, I think, once in the stand-up, White, the first baseman. Is this truly just, okay, yeah, we'll pay his salary to take on these other two players, or do you think there's any chance that he plays for Atlanta?
A big part of it comes down to health. So Evan White was one of the 5, I guess now 6 players with Jackson Churio who signed an MLB contract before debuting in the bigs.
Okay.
Won a Gold Glove in 2020 at first base, played in 2021, but batted under 200, struggled at the plate, and then has been injured and has barely played any baseball since then. He got, I think it's 2 games in AAA last year, had a groin issue, had hip surgery, and so the likelihood of him being able to not only get back into competitive games, but playing well enough to force his way to Atlanta and get into the lineup this season and next season are relatively small. Obviously, you have DH taken care of this year with Marcell Ozuna. First base is taken care of, in essence, forever with Matt Olson. And so is there a potential path where in 2025 he gets at-bats at DH if Marcell Ozuna walks at the end of the contract and Atlanta doesn't pick up the club option? It's entirely possible, but in all likelihood, Evan White probably will be in AAA Gwinnett. He'll be an expensive insurance policy should you have some sort of significant injury to Matt Olson.
Is there any kind of trade for a position of need that you could see on the horizon that this sets up? Does Vaughn Grissom become more tradable now after this, or anybody else on this roster become more tradable now if you're the Atlanta Braves?
Not necessarily. I don't really think there's any glaring thing that you need other than, do you trade a different pitching prospect to go get a starter? And I think somebody like Dylan Cease could potentially still happen. Obviously,
that's the
Atlanta's
big name
still
right
on
now.
him.
Yeah.
He's only owed $9 million or it's projected to be $9 million in arbitration for 2024.
Okay.
And so could you make an addition to the rotation, somebody like that? It's entirely possible. But at this point, it feels like Atlanta's pretty much set with major moves. And if anything, you might see them go out and acquire some sort of utility guy that can play shortstop outside of the Andrew Velasquez that they've already signed to a minor league deal, just to give them one more option in the infield. But now, between Luke Williams and Evan White, you have your first base and your third base utility options in AAA Gwinnett right now.
Right. He's Lindsey Crosby. I'm Zach Blackerby. We will have all the coverage of this trade, winter meetings, and more for free at bravestoday.com.